Hi, everyone. I'm the Marvelous Patrick, and welcome to Thing I Love, a show where we invite guests to come on and just tell us about something they love and why they love it and tell us all about it. And so we can love it too. We're going to share the love. My guest this week is a good friend of mine. She was once a student of mine when I was teaching college. Her name is Rowan Toffoli, and she's going to tell us all about Pathfinder. And actually, we're going to end up talking a little bit just about role-playing games in general and all the fun and things like that. It's a really great conversation, and I can't wait for you to see it. So without further ado, let's meet Rowan Toffoli and learn about Pathfinder and why it's something we should love. So today I'm talking with Rowan Toffoli, and we have known each other for quite some time. She was actually a student of mine back at MMI, way back in the old days of the early 2000s and mid 2000s, 2010s, mid 2010s. I don't know, the mid teens. I don't know what we call it.
The early 2010s.
The early 2010s,
right?
Somewhere. Yeah, I don't know. Well, one of my graphic design students, and she's a brilliant designer. Whatnot, has a highfalutin gig at a very fancy pants employer at this point. So she's probably one of my greatest successes I'm most proud of is her, because I'm going to live vicariously through her. And she's here today. How are you, Rowan?
I'm good. How are you?
I am so great. Thank you so much for coming on. You are actually the first person that is recording, just because I have like a bunch of these set up and then I'm going to edit them. But so I don't know exactly when this is going to air or be available. But you are the first person recording. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
It's nice having you as the first person, a nice friendly person, because I have no idea what I'm doing. And if I don't do it right, I can get the bugs ironed out for when I have some of the other people who I am less familiar with coming on the show, who are more like professional acquaintances and stuff.
This is a safe environment. We can figure it out together.
I am a snowflake, and I am not melting in this safe space. So, who's your cat?
This is Edward. Yes. So this is Edward. He is, well, I don't know what he is, but he's sweet.
White.
He's white and he's sweet. And he's not very bright, but we don't tell him that, so it's fine.
I won't tell. Today, Rowan has joined us to talk about, I think you can see my cat, so maybe, well, no, I'm going to cut this out. Never mind. So today, Rowan has joined us to talk about a thing she loves, because that's, of course, the name of the show. So, Rowan, what's the thing you love?
The thing I love is Pathfinder, which is a pen and paper tabletop role-playing game. It's very similar to Dungeons and Dragons, but it runs off of an open gaming license, so it's not trademarked in the same sense that Wizards of the Coast trademarked Dungeons and Dragons. It's very open and open to play, very accessible.
How long have you been playing Pathfinder?
Forever. I actually originally started with Dungeons and Dragons 3.5, and then Pathfinder 1 is very similar to that system, but I moved to it because that's what one of my friends was running. They were DMing it or GMing it. And that was probably, how long have I known Phil? 10 years ago? Oh my gosh, I'm old. 10 years.
Oh, wow. So, you talk about you start with Dungeons and Dragons, and I think that's a gateway role-playing game for a lot of us, right? Because it's kind of like the big one everyone knows. That's the one that church groups fear and things like that, not realizing that there's all these other things. So Pathfinder kind of gets the satanic path, I guess, or something. I don't know. But that's why is Pathfinder why do you love it so much more than Dungeons and Dragons? Because I know you've always been like the Pathfinder person, and I'm old school Dungeons and Dragons guy, because I remember 2nd edition, which was like the only edition for like 20 years. And they're like, maybe we'll make this 3rd edition at some point. Like, they even came out with like another 2nd edition book, and they're like, well, we're not going to call it a new edition. There's just this one little change.
Just a little tweak.
That, and they're like, well, they wouldn't even call it like a 2.5 or anything officially back then. And, so, I mean, for literally 20 years, I played 2nd edition, and there wasn't like you kind of heard there might be these other things like out there and somewhere like there's this thing called GURPS. What's a GURP? And so you found Pathfinder because your group was, but how did you fall in love with Pathfinder?
Let's see. Okay. So I think the biggest thing to note is that every tabletop system has its own nuances and different things that someone may love or someone might not like as much. And there's definitely a system out there for everybody. And maybe it's not Pathfinder for you, but for me it is. What really got me into the first version of Pathfinder was a game that my husband was running for me. So that's called a duet when there's one GM and one player. And that just really made me fall in love with the idea of collaboratively telling a story together and relying on this system of rules that a company has provided to you to figure out what your story is, what your character can do, what is their arc going to be. And then from that version, that's Pathfinder 1, I got into Pathfinder 2, which came out last August in 2019. And I really didn't want to admit it at first, but I really love it. It's so much better than the original Pathfinder. It's just easier to play. It's very clean and clear cut, and the action economy is significantly improved from the original Pathfinder. I look forward to playing now instead of feeling like, oh, it's just a thing that I have to do, or oh, I have to level up my character this week. It's going to take forever. I actually want to do all of the different parts of the game, and I want to actually learn the rules, which honestly I didn't really want to do with the first Pathfinder or any D&D game or system previously.
You talked about earlier that Pathfinder is a very open system compared to like Dungeons and Dragons. What does that mean, open?
Yeah, so that would be the open gaming license that Pathfinder falls under. So any, I don't want to say any because I can't like speak from that place of authority, but many other tabletop gaming systems will fall under that open gaming license where their core rules are just available. I think you can find the official rules on Paizo. You can find, Paizo is the publishing company for Pathfinder. You can find the official rules there. You can find monster stats there, all just readily available. With D&D, a lot of their content is copywritten, and you can't, really mention it, or you can't use it without purchasing it for whatever platform you're using it on, and that's fine. Like, of course, they're a company and they need to make money, but Pathfinder feels a lot more accessible as a tabletop game, just for the fact that it is open game license.
Okay, so if I'm a new player, okay, I'm coming into Pathfinder, how do I get started? Let's pretend, let's do first scenarios. I've always kind of been curious about Dungeons and Dragons and role playing, but I haven't played anything, and now I'm not going to be a game master. I'm going to play a character, and I'm brand new. I've never done RPG. How do I get started in Pathfinder?
Okay, so first of all, you need a GM. So you need somebody like me who can run the game for you.
Let's assume I have that.
All right,
assume
so
I have a GM. I've got a group or something. They invited me in. I've learned the secret handshake. What do I?
You've got your dice.
I've got dice. What are the dice? What are these funny? Walk me through everything like a noob.
Okay, so do we have like 10 hours? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so
editing this down.
Perfect. Okay, so really all that you need to start playing Pathfinder or any tabletop game is going to be pen, paper, a set of dice, or a dice roller. You can also play online through systems like roll20.net, which is what I'm doing now for reasons that are probably obvious. But that's really all you need. If you've got a GM, you can just start. There are character sheets available through Paizo's website for either of their systems, Pathfinder 1 or 2. There's sheets in the back of the book that you can copy, and then you can purchase the books as a PDF if you want to, but they really aren't necessary. If one person in your group has a copy of the book, you can just look at the book. It's fine. If you're playing with a GM who's experienced enough to help you build your character, that's great. I, along with my husband Phil, recommend that you let your GM build your first character for you with, of course, your help, so that you know that you're getting the type of character you want to play. But it can be really intimidating to just jump in and try to make your own character, because there's a lot of math involved and there are some rules. But
let's talk about, okay, what are the statistics that people have for a character?
Okay,
you said like there's charisma.
Yeah, so there are 6 ability scores. There's strength. So you've got strength, which is how strong you are physically. Dexterity, which is how nimble you are. I usually play a rogue, which is...
What is a rogue, then?
You're asking so many questions and I'm not finishing any of the answers. Okay,
so,
let me... ability
let's slow
scores.
Down. There's 6 scores.
Okay, so 6 scores. So strength, how strong you are physically. Dexterity, how nimble you are. There's charisma, how approachable you are, charismatic, obviously. And then there are intelligence, wisdom, and constitution. So intelligence and wisdom are similar, but slightly different. And I never play a character who's dependent on either of them. So I can't give you the like actual definition of either one, and that's fine. And then constitution is like, it impacts how many hit points you get or how able you are to withstand like a poison, for example. So those are the ability scores. And the way that those are determined, it kind of varies. Well, it varies system by system. And then Pathfinder 2 has its own set of rules where you start at 10 in each of those 6 sections. And then based on the ancestry and the class that you choose, so like your race, like if you wanted to be an elf or a human or a whatever, dwarf as another example, and then your class would be like a rogue or a druid or a fighter. All of those decisions that you make impact the math that goes into your ability scores. Very simple math. The book tells you exactly what to do with what numbers. It's super easy. It's so comparatively.
Let's talk about classes.
Okay.
What are classes?
So a class, and I'm going to rely on the internet to help me make sure I explain this correctly so that you don't get
Google.
Google. Okay. So 1 second here. So a class is going to be essentially what your character does. So
like a job?
Kind of. So I'll give you an example. The character that I am playing in the duet that Phil runs for me right now, her name is Altea. She is a rogue druid, so she's 2 classes. We homebrewed.
It makes it sound like a rogue druid's like someone who like goes and plants trees somewhere like Johnny Appleseed or something like that. Like, I'm gonna go be one with the earth in your garden and you're not gonna know.
So there actually is an archetype of druid that is kind of the opposite of that, who is like seeking to complete the life and death cycle, basically, called an entropy druid, which is the character I'm playing next in our next duet, because this one's just about wrapped up, which I've never been able to say before. I'm very excited about that.
Wait, adventures end? Because I have DM'd and I've played as characters, and I have never been part of a game that actually came to a natural conclusion. It's always just like, well, when are we going to meet again? And then a new group would form.
Yes. No,
that's the way these things go.
That happens all the time. So I think the only reason that this campaign is actually wrapping up the way that it's supposed to is because it's just the 2 of us and we rely on each other's schedules to keep the game going. We've been playing this duet since I was pregnant. So like 3 years now, which is crazy. So classes.
Okay. So you said there's what are the different classes?
There are quite a few. So since 2E just came out, they might be adding additional classes in as like expanded content, but the ones that they have right now are alchemist, barbarian. So a barbarian would be like a super strong fighter, basically. A bard, which I love bards. I'm bad at playing them, but I like them a lot, just because they're so fun. Like, you get to buff the party a lot, which is awesome. And then there's a champion. So in previous editions, that would be called a paladin. But in this edition, it's champion. I don't know. They made a choice. That's cool. So paladin is going to be like a kind of religiously driven, always almost always good. There are some like homebrew rules that you could do, or some somewhat official rules that you could do to make a fallen paladin. Whatever. That's neither here nor there. Champions, clerics. So those would be like your kind of healer sort of person. Again, church devoted, and they could be not necessarily good. They don't have to be good or positive or whatever.
So you can have like an evil god that your character follows.
Yeah, you could
They're
definitely.
Like, yeah.
You could definitely like follow an evil patron if you wanted to, if that's okay with your GM. There are a lot of GMs who don't allow actually evil characters because they're really hard to run. Like, it's really hard to run a game for a character who is set on being bad. I almost always play, we're getting off topic again, but I almost always play chaotic neutral characters. So somebody who is kind of out for themselves and not really concerned about doing good in the world or doing bad, and they're not lawful, so they're the opposite of lawful. They're chaotic. They aren't adhering to the laws of whatever land they're in, or their patron's laws, or whatever.
Now I know you've mentioned this word a couple times, and that word is homebrew. And I want to know, what does homebrew mean with Pathfinder?
So homebrew means that you are brewing at home your own set of rules or your own land that you're playing in. We homebrew, I have always homebrewed all of the settings that we play in. So we made, Phil made mostly, an entire like universe, basically. So he made like the city of Hadar where our duets are set. And he made this like huge desert and forest and ocean and other continent across the ocean where a bunch of stuff went down. And then I took that world over and started turning it into kind of my own play area, my own sandbox, I guess. And then he made another universe. He actually made maps for it and made all of these different balanced races and tribes, and just really cool. Like, that's all homebrew. So that's kind of the setting side of playing for homebrew, and then there's the rules side of homebrewing, which we haven't done a whole lot of in 2E, just because the system's really good, so I don't need to. But in previous systems, there would be rules that felt like they were arbitrary, or rules that didn't make a lot of sense, or they were written in a way where the interpretation was so clouded that it was easier to just do away with the rule. One of the good examples of that would be what's called a feat tax. So a feat, F-E-A-T, is like kind of a bonus cool thing that your character can do. In Pathfinder 1, you get to choose them every other level, and there are some where you have to have a prerequisite. So you have to choose number 1 before you can choose number 2. Sometimes those are really arbitrary on why you have to have that prerequisite, so you combine them into one feat, and then you're not spending like 3 levels to get there. You're just doing 1. So it's, you homebrew to make the game more enjoyable for your players and for yourself as the GM.
I think we always did that at Dungeons and Dragons, where at least the people I always played with, we were always like real loose rule people, where like we're going to assume you have the spell components, for instance. If you're going to cast a spell, where like there's rules for people using magic, like you got to make sure you go and buy like these things, and it takes this long to cast a spell. No. like
nobody makes people do that. Right, nobody.
Because by the time your spell is cast, I'm going to cast Fireball. It'll be ready in 3 turns.
Right?
It's over! That one explodes and doesn't do anything.
That's not even like the problem with that set of rules. So the issue there is that you're making your players bookkeep when you're sticking to the rules as written and making them find a sprig of lavender and a piece of sheep's wool and a whatever else they need to cast Fireball. That's a bad example. Those aren't the actual items. Don't add me in the comments. I like the idea
that I'm using wool to cast Fireball. That'd be fun.
I mean, just dip it in kerosene. It's fine. Oh, God. This is a happy channel.
Not good positive content. This probably won't make it. Actually, the whole thing where I kind of detoured probably won't make it. I'm going to go buy stuff. I'm going to become a Pathfinder player. I found a group. You mentioned there's dice. and things like that in books. What's the bare minimum, but what's the best setup for a first time player to go in and give it a try?
Okay, so bare minimum, nothing. You don't need to own anything. You can just get the rules, the core rules online, and you can build your character that way. And you can build a character in whatever system or whatever program works for you. Like you can do it in a form fillable PDF if you want to keep it free, or you could build it in OneNote. I don't know why you would, but you can do that if you want to. So bare minimum, nothing. As long as you have a GM who can help you set up your character, you're good to go. Realistically, if you, like me, and I assume like you as well, want to know the rules and you want to understand the core fundamentals of the game.
I may enjoy having books
Yeah.
of role-playing games. I think for me, I get to, like, my stepson is a baby nerd now, and so I played with him and one of my nephews, and it was a bizarre adventure where they, instead of helping the princess, decided to repair a roof. They became roofers. There was a dragon person roofer. It was so hard as the game master to get them to actually do adventure.
One time I became a zoo owner. I had a menagerie of critters that I clubbed over the head and took back to our base camp. And one of them was a kobold because it was the first like thing that we ran into, and the entire group was telling me like they are sentient, they have a society, they have religion. This is terrible. He probably has a name, and I was just like, whatever. Yeah, I didn't
describing a prison.
Okay, that was the only sentient creature. I didn't realize that they were like actually, I didn't realize he had feelings. My bad. It's fine. His name, I named him John.
Other things in this included poor people.
Yeah. It's fine. That campaign died, so they're fine. But anyway, to answer the original question, the best setup if you really want to play, so the core rule book for sure. If you're playing in person, you'd want to have a standard set of dice, which is seven dice, the D20 being the most important, and then you'll use the other ones based on what type of character you build, like a D6 or a D8. And the D means how many sides are on the die. And then a pencil, a notebook, you can have your character sheet, but that's really all you need. If you're going to play online, you want to have a nice headset and a good internet connection, but that's really it. You don't need to subscribe to the premium version of Roll20 to have a good time, because it's all about collaboratively telling a story. What makes a good game is having a good DM and a good group.
Is there like a game board or anything? Like, what about miniatures?
Great question. So you don't need those things to play. You don't need a mini, you don't need a game mat or a battle map or battle mat, which is a series of squares. It's a gridded map where you can draw out what your area looks like, basically. You don't need any of those things. I think that for a lot of people, that really enhances the experience, and then it makes them feel like they're more in the game or more invested in the game, and that's fine. But I don't need those things to play. I think that having a battle map, like a dry erase board, is great. I do use them occasionally, but I actually don't have a lot of combat in the games that I DM. It's just not really a style that I like to run.
So if you don't like combat, what's the part of the game that gets you really excited?
Oh man, the social interaction. So aside from, this will be a bit of a story, so give me a second to get through it. Aside from all of the parts of my learned history that I got from you, I attribute a lot of my career success to playing D&D, because the part that I look forward to the most is the social interaction. So I like the idea of having combats be social, how you interact with other characters or other NPCs or villains, and how that impacts the world and how it impacts your success. So the reason I feel like that attributes to my career success is because it taught me how to be charismatic and it taught me how to speak to people. Because if you remember, I was not very good at that when I was in school.
I wouldn't have done that, but that's a really good point about these games, right? I think there's a safer feeling because you're not you in the game; you're a character. You can be anyone. One of the things I would always do when I was playing Dungeons and Dragons and making a character is I'd roll 4-sided dice, and odds would be male and evens would be female.
Okay.
So that when I created a character, partly because I played a lot of dudes.
Sure.
And so there just weren't a lot of like females. There weren't a lot of women characters in the group because teenage boys. What are they going to inherently make? Avatars of themselves, right?
Right.
The wish
Of course.
fulfillment in a lot of ways. And so we'd have like one girl out of like the 6 of us. It's like, okay, well, I'll play. We don't want just like a token girl. We want So I often end up playing female characters, which is I don't know. It's just kind of one of those things where, and that's not something I think, that's one of the beauties. And I'm not trying to be like it's a trans thing or anything like that because I'm a cis dude, but I think there is something about that about being able to be someone else. Like I am not actually a half elf woman, right?
Sure.
who casts magic, or I am not the bet one of my favorite ones was like she was, instead of a Catholic schoolgirl, a Thor schoolgirl. It's like fundamentalist Thor.
Okay.
And so when she joined the group, it was like part of her missionary work as a cleric now that she was like, and so when she'd go into battle, she'd try to convert the unbelievers. And so I was very lucky because I had a game master in that instance who really played with that. He's like, okay, well, he came up with a system based on like charisma and stuff. Like she'd like try to convert people to the religion of Thor, and then they wouldn't be enemies anymore. And there was experience points based on okay, if they convert, then they'll fight on your side, or they won't fight you anymore. Right. So like that's like Spider-Man, right? Like Peter Parker's the shy kid who has no friends and he doesn't talk much, and he's kind of he's the original word in Amazing Fantasy number 15 was wallflower, because that was the 60s. But when he puts on the mask, he's Spider-Man. Spider-Man's this guy who's out there and telling jokes and bouncing around and hyperactive and annoying and funny and all these things that Peter Parker isn't. And I think there's a very similar thing with role playing, being able to be a character.
Mm-hmm. There definitely is. So there are actually studies related to that, and I'll send you.
Wait, okay. So first there was math. Now you're telling me there's science.
I'm saying that people have studied the impact of being an avatar in things like video games and how it impacts your confidence. So one kind of researcher, one scientist is Jane McGonigal, and she does. So sorry, give me 1 second here. There we go. Okay. So she did a study about how playing games like World of Warcraft, MMORPG, makes you feel more confident because you're playing this ideal self, this avatar of who you are, or who you want to be. And I definitely think that games like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder give you that outside of a video game setting. And I think that's really cool, because I'm definitely not inherently the person who's really confident and controlling the room and being the center of attention, because I'm an introvert and I do not like being in that position. And I never used to be able to do that. But now with my job, I'm very front and center, and I'm very like in the spotlight a lot, giving presentations and talking about the work that I do, which is terrifying for me. But if I'm Altea, who's confident and charismatic and can tell a joke to kind of break the ice a bit, then it's a lot easier and I feel better doing the things that I do at work. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So talk about when you role play a character, what do you do? How does that work?
Oh man. Okay. So it depends on the person, right? So role playing is totally optional. Like if you're not comfortable coming to the table and being like, well, I decide that I'm going to blah, 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 and speaking in their voice or their tone or whatever, you don't have to do that. That's fine. for a long time, I didn't. I would speak in the third person, and I would say, Altea would, or Altea should, because there was too much of that barrier. But when I started speaking in first person, saying I say, or I take out my bow, and it made it feel a lot more real for me. And I'm really glad that I did that. It opened up a lot of doors, I guess, in role playing. Some people get really into it where they'll like dress up, they've got the elf ears on or whatever, and that's cool too. Like, you just need to find your level of comfort in role playing.
Awesome. Yeah, I've never been the person who dresses up or anything. I think I'll go as far as like I'll talk, and it's like obviously it's the character talking. I've seen people who are like, when I do this, I'm the character talking, and when I'm not this,
Yes.
I'm just talking like me. Yeah, and there's like little things like that. But yeah, I think there's this natural flow to it, and that's part of like how these games work, right? Is in a lot of ways you're just a conversation happening, and you say, okay, eventually my character comes upon this action, and then they're going to do this action. You roll some dice, and the numbers say if the action is successful or how successful it was and stuff. But I think you hit on this idea. It's a community, but we've said there's math, there's science, but there's also, I would say, the English liberal arts, because you're telling a story.
Yes. So I'm actually writing the duet that Phil is running for me as a book right now, because it's just so good. Like, it's such a compelling story to me.
Are you going to give him co-writer credit then?
Yes.
For this?
Yes, or at least a dedication. Come on.
He gets like a mention like somewhere, and this guy was around.
I'm doing all the hard work.
You just had to build the world. You actually have to do this stuff. Yeah, you just had to. Yeah.
I have to like make the verbs happen and the words on the page. Man, it's terrible.
That should be. You know what? I think that should be like a T-shirt or something. I make the verbs happen.
So I used to spend hours and hours prepping to run a game for a handful of hours every week or every other week, because I thought that's what you were supposed to do. But that doesn't really contribute to organic storytelling, because it's not just you as the GM telling a story or running a story for your players. You're building it together. So now I don't plan anymore. I just wing it. Every time that Phil and I play together, I just wing it. I recently started up a new game of Pathfinder with him and a couple of my friends from work. So we're playing on Roll20, the online platform, basically. That one I did plan a little bit. I got their backstories that they wanted, and I helped them build their characters, and I helped them kind of build the more literary backstory of their characters instead of the like math and science heavy side. And then I worked them into a story where we could start our first session. And that's all the planning I really did. I think that I am pretty unlike other GMs because I don't know all the rules. Like, I didn't spend dozens of hours poring over the rule books and trying to figure it all out, like how everything works perfectly, because it doesn't feel organic to me. 2, I don't like combat that much. I think it's pretty boring and really tedious. And 3, I intentionally don't kill my characters. I don't let them, I don't make them be in situations where they're gonna die, because that's crappy. Like, like you said, they spent so much time building these characters that they deserve to play with them. Will I put them in situations where it's really dramatic and they might feel like they're going to die? Yeah, obviously. But I'm never going to be like, okay, you're a level 2 player. Here's a black dragon. Figure it out and have fun. They would die immediately. Like, that would be terrible. And that's bad GMing, in my opinion.
I usually would say I don't care for cooperative games, because I want to win something, or I want to, I like the idea of like, I won, or someone else lost. And then like I started playing against Pandemic, and I think it's because I had a really bad first cooperative game experience. Then I realized I didn't. Dungeons and Dragons is a cooperative game, right? You win when you reach the goal, or you reach the end of the story, or something like that. Same way, like you win a book if
exactly
win reading a book, or win watching a TV show, and you're doing it together, and you can't get to the end without the other humans involved. Even in a duet, you're not playing against the game master, even though they're like the bad guys or whatever, but they're also the other good guys. They're the other, the non-player characters. All that we say characters, right? Because it's a story thing. And I think that's the thing, like, we are playing together. So game masters don't win if they kill your character. And I think that was, I think it's something, especially like a lot of new people, like if they're just like creating it for the first time, maybe don't get, like, if they're running it for the first time as a game master, like, you're not playing against them, you're still playing with them, you're just in a different role.
Yeah, and I think that goes both ways too. There are definitely some archetypes of players who feel like they are playing against the other party members or they're playing against the DM. And I just don't have room at my table for that. There's just no time to, I guess, DM that type of player because it takes away from the fun.
And that's what it's really all about, right? That's why we love it, is it's the fun.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing the love about Pathfinder and role playing games and everything. It's been a great having you on. Like I said, technically you're my first guest, but I don't know if this is my first episode or not because I don't know when it's all going to come together. But thank you so much, Rowan.
Thank you
Is
for
there
having me.
anything you'd like to plug or anything for people?
Yes. You can find me and my husband talking about duets and tabletop games on Open Book Games on YouTube. We will put more content up soon when we have a desktop where I can edit videos.
And I'll include links to that and everything in the show notes and the comment, and stuff with YouTube. So make sure you check that out. It's a great. I actually watched their videos. They're a lot of fun because they're fun people doing a fun thing that they love.
Thank you.
So hey, thank you so much for coming on.
No problem. It was great. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks for watching Thing I Love. I'm the marvelous Patrick. For links on all the stuff we've talked about as well as our guests, please check out the show notes below. And also, for extended interviews and more bonus features, please check out patreon.com/marvelouspatrick. Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe and like buttons, please. Bye.